So, so systems was definitely part of what I was interested in. And I think I was always interested in a sort of why question. Why do humans create so much pain and suffering when they really don't mean to? And it may be that there's some place that humans can get to where we want to create pain, or there's a taste of pain that is serving us in some way. But actually what I saw in many of the situations that I was in is a lot of pain and suffering that actually was really deeply unintended. So, you know, you could say that's been a bit of my life question. I don't know why I thought engineering would help me with that, but somehow I thought technology might give some answers. But I started to find answers when I started to look inside, you know, what is it that's unconscious, that is creating and shaping our behavior that we're not aware of. And that's to do with then why we create these unintended consequences. Okay, we'd love to start. So that's a bit of an intro. We'd love to start by you just saying something, and there's quite a lot of us. So we're going to just have a little paired sharing. And the question is, what's drawn you here? What is it that's brought you to this session today? And if you feel to, you might want to share something that you're grateful for. Isn't that always a good practice? So we can also just tune into beauty as we go into these spaces where we talk about things that can be challenging and difficult. So some wonderful tech wizard is going to put us into paired sharings. Take time to just introduce yourself, and you've got a few minutes just to speak about what's drawing you here today. So welcome back. I hope you got to say and hear a few things. And it'd be lovely just to have a few words, just, you know, what's one or two headlines for you while you're here, and just put them in the chat, just so we can see what's drawing us together, what's coming in. And that's super helpful for me to know of this huge landscape of human culture that I've been exploring, you know, what's most helpful to speak about. So what's drawing you here? See if you can just put a few words about it in the chat, and let's see, hear a little bit from each other that way. Why are you here in this session? What's drawing you? Is it the topic? Is it something, a particular situation in your life? Is it a particular interest? Is it to do with where you are in the reworlding journey? Lovely. Beautiful, and some lovely qualities going in there as well. Oh. So just with some of the mentions of grief, someone's community broke apart, welcoming that. Yeah. Just take another minute if there's anything, and then we're going to carry on. Great, these are such great little headlines and questions. This theme of healing, this question of community. Isn't this the toughest technology? This is for me, how we create healthy culture is the most challenging question. How we do that in times even of plenty and abundance, but especially in times of stress. Great. Lovely. So these are great questions, really helpful to see. Thank you. Yeah, how do we create healthy culture despite so much that is toxic? What a great question. How do we do this when the context we're in has so much dysfunction in it? And it's in here as well, isn't it? It's not just out there, it's in here. This sense of being pervaded by, what would you call it? What should we call it? Let's find out. Great. So I'm going to, I used to swear that I would stop doing PowerPoints, but it's very difficult to do things on flip charts. So there is a bit of a PowerPoint, and I'm just going to share some slides. I think it can be helpful for people that are more visual or like to see words. So, so here's this gathering of ideas, and I don't feel like I'm the originator of these. I feel like I've been a kind of squirrel, gathering bits from many different places, and so this is how I present this: how to create it, why we often don't. And this feels really important, that this isn't the truth. So you'll see what an engineer I still am. I really like maps and models. They help my cognitive brain to make sense of landscapes that are often really confusing and complicated. But this sentence feels really important. It's not the truth. This is just a way of looking, a lens. There are many lenses that we need to understand the truth more deeply. So this isn't a kind of this isn't the landscape. This is just a way of looking. And if it doesn't work for you, please find something that works better. So I have no attachment to pushing my models to anyone that it doesn't work for. This is our plan. We've done a bit of welcoming. We're going to do an experiential embodied exploration of archetypes. And I'll talk about why these archetypes feel meaningful for me as we go through. When we've done the embodied exploration, we're going to I'm going to talk a bit about the concepts that I put together. So for me, this is one map or model in this body of work that I call Healthy Human Culture. We'll have a bit of space for shared reflection, so a small group sharing, and then some Q&A, or, I'd love to hear how things land in you. And then we're closing at 11 o'clock UK time. So we've got 2 hours altogether. We're about half an hour through. Okay. So we're going to do our embodied exploration, and I'm just going to propose this, that we're going to take pairs of archetypes. I'm going to speak a bit more about them later. These are archetypes that I've come across in lots of different systems of thinking. So in my psychosynthesis training, we talked about will and love. If we think about our nervous systems, we might think about an action, the sort of sympathetic, that archetype, and the reflection, stillness, digestion, resting, that kind of sense of way of being. In the transition movement, I would say the biggest conflict that we had was between doing and being, and it kept on arising either as a tension or actually as a source of really challenging conflict at the center of the movement and in many of the projects that happen. So I'm going to propose that we take these. We could find lots of other pairs of archetypes in other traditions. And what we're going to do is just do an embodied exploration of one pair. So I'm going to invite you to choose a pair that kind of works for you. I'd suggest that you stick with these pairs that are a bit tried and tested. So you might choose will and love, or doing and being, or action and stillness, reflection. Okay, so choose your pairs of words. And then I'm going to invite you to stand up if you can. If you've got a bit of space, that's great. You can totally let go of the screen and just follow my voice. And I'm going to do it a little bit with you. So if I get a bit out of breath, that's also might be happening. So the idea of this is that these words have something to do with health. Health. This question, what is health? So in psychosynthesis, for instance, a healthy person was somebody who had a healthy will and a healthy capacity for love. So we're going to be playing with inhabiting these qualities or archetypes in their health, and see if we can find them in their distortions, and see if any of this feels familiar in our lives. Okay, so I'm standing up. Let's just shake out a little bit if there's any kind of residual stress or stretch, and really inviting you to take care of your body in this. So don't push yourself to anything that feels uncomfortable. Let's really not do any self-harm in this session. That would be so upsetting. So we're going to start with the more active word. So if my pair of words is doing and being, I'm going to start by just inviting my body to find some way of expressing doing. So I might close my eyes if that's comfortable, or I might just tune into the word doing and just see what my body wants to move. So your doing or your will or your action might be completely different to mine. But just see if we can find some way of, sorry, of finding a doing that, finding a doing, a will, an action. So finding that in your body. And for some of us, body and expression with our body might feel comfortable. If it's uncomfortable, just welcome that and let it go and just be playful and experimental. There's no right way to do this. And your body's way is exactly the right way for you. So I'm doing with will. What's my will? How's that expressing? What's my action? And just playing with different shapes, maybe different speeds. Really get into the feeling of doing or action or will in your body. And we're going to just say this is the kind of normal version of it. This is the normal version, an everyday version of this word. And now we're going to play with some distortions of it. So one way that we might find a distortion is to imagine that we're just going to keep on with this. We're just going to keep on with will, with action, with doing. So imagine that we're going to carry on for an hour, just in our mind, let our imagination take us. We've been doing this, willing this, actioning for an hour. And now let's imagine that we do this for a whole day. You know, maybe we have a 5-minute break. Just notice, does this feel at all familiar? Doing, will, action, action, action. And we might get to the end of the day, have something to eat, take a rest, maybe sleep, and we get up, and tomorrow we're going to just do the same. We're going to do more of it. How does that feel in your body? And at the end, we're going to gather words for these states. So just noticing if there are words that describe this feeling. More doing, more will, more action. And the day after, we're going to do some more. And we're going to do it all week. Does your life ever feel like this? And I'm just going to play with another sort of distortion, which is to increase the speed. So now we've put time pressure on. We need to do faster, will faster, act faster. Just let yourself speed up. Don't hurt yourself. And just see how that feels in your body. Are there words for that? Noticing feelings, words, body sensations. Okay. And does that ever feel like your life? Does your life feel like this? Okay, and then we're going to just slow that down. Let go, the time pressure's off. Shift away from time stress. But we're still doing, we're willing or acting. Come back to the normal. Just notice any words for this, how it feels in the normal. And then we're just going to make a bit of a shift again, still with this word, and explore what is the essence of this? What's the essence of this word, this archetype? So see if you can find a movement. How does your body change? You know, if you like, what's the divine quality? What's the pure form of this word? And if we express that in our bodies, if I express that, what does that look like? How does that move me? And how do I feel? What words describe that slightly different form of doing? Maybe it's the same as your everyday. For me, it feels a bit different. But what's the essence of this archetype? How is it slightly different, or maybe really different, when we ask that question of our bodies? Okay, and now we're going to just keep moving through these experiments. So just going to invite you to start to tune into the other word. So still with your first word, I'm still doing, still with will, but now I'm going to let in to my movement a bit of the second word. So I'm going to be doing, but I'm going to invite some being. If I'm doing will, if I'm moving will, I'm going to let in some love. See if you can have both of those somehow in your movement. Don't let your mind get too involved. Ask your body, what does your body say? How does your body express a bit of both words? And you might feel like these different energies or qualities are kind of dancing through your body. And that all might feel really weird, but see if your body can just experiment and play with it. There's some action and there's some stillness or reflection. Some action and some stillness, these qualities coming together. Okay, and now we're just going to start letting go of the first word and moving more to the second word. So we're letting go of will, coming to embody love, letting go of action, coming to stillness and reflection, letting go of doing, coming into being. And again, without your mind getting too involved, how does your body express this word, this energy or archetype? Letting your body experiment. It's fine to have different shapes, different movements for this, different speeds. Really tuning into the word. Noticing what words come with this. What other words might you use to express this feeling in your body when you give this archetype or energy, this word, some shape, and inhabit this? Okay, and again, we're just going to do a little bit of exploring the kind of health and the distortions of this. So we're going to just do the same experiment. So now imagine that you stay in this being or reflection or stillness or in this space of love, and you do that for a whole hour and 2 hours. You just stay with this. And then you do it for the whole day. How would that feel? Maybe there's a little bit of a break, take care of your body. This is really just how you're spending your time in this archetype, in this quality. And then tomorrow you're going to get up and do the same thing. You're going to do more of it. And you're going to keep doing it, or being it, or being in the stillness. You're just going to keep with this one energy quality. And with that question again, does your life ever feel like this? Has this happened for you? And what if this quality dominated most of your life? How would that feel? It may be words, it may just be sensations. And now again, we're just going to seek out the distortion by exaggerating. So if there's slowness, be even slower. If there's stillness, even more still. I don't know how you're moving, love, but even more of that. So whatever the quality is, just really see if you can exaggerate it. And again, with that question, how does this feel in my body? Are there words for this? It's an exaggeration. And what if I had to stay here? What if this was all I had in my life? Does it ever feel like this? Okay. And then we're going to come back to whatever the kind of normal was again, so letting go of those exaggerations. And let's see if we can move towards the essence. So whatever this word is, can we find a way of expressing the essence of it in our bodies? It might just be a shape, it might be a movement, it might be a dance somehow, something. Letting your body know. What's the essence of this archetype or word or energy? And how does that feel? Okay, and back to a sort of everyday version. And then we're just going to do the same thing of bringing these pair of words together in our bodies. So from my being, I'm just going to invite a little bit of the doing energy. I'm in stillness reflection. I'm bringing in a bit of action and just really inhabiting the place of both together, will and love. So introducing a bit of will into my loving. And just notice how that feels when both come together in my body. Give yourself a minute or so just to play with that, two archetypes together. And we might ask that question again, does my life feel like this? Is this familiar? Do I feel like this? Okay. So we've just got another minute to find a way to finish that. If there's anything you want to play with that we haven't done, just exploring for yourself. And if there's nothing to do with these words, just see what your body wants to do as a way of closing. Any bit of kindness or stretching, anything that wants to shake out, anything that wants a bit of tender touch. It's finding a way to end in kindness to yourself, appreciating this extraordinary miracle of life that is a human body. So, and that we can even do this with it. Okay, so if we can gently find our way back to the screens, I'm going to stop screen sharing. Welcome back, everybody. And we are going to just harvest those words. So shall I do it, or Teresa, have you got it there? The word harvest document.
In the chat.
You are awesome, Dita. There we go. Fantastic. So if we click on that Google document, hopefully everyone can get in. And there are spaces in here where we can capture so the blue at the top is for the that word of action, will, doing. And on the left, we write the essence. So the pure version, the normal, everyday, what does that feel like? On the right, we write, what does the distortion feel like? That purple box in the middle is for the two archetypes relating to each other. And at the bottom in the green is the same, the essence, the normal and the distortion for the love, being, reflection, archetype. So just put any words that were with you. I've put a few examples in there. So let's just gather, what does this feel like when we explore these words with our bodies? So lovely to see all these words going in. Thank you. Let's just have a look. So let's pause the writing and just have a look at what we've gathered together in our shared exploration of these archetypes. We're just having a look at the action, will, doing archetype, its normal version, its distortions, some of these words: exhausting, frantic, avoidance, desperate, sadness, powerless, chaotic, and its essence: concentrating, focus, power, essence, purpose. And then the relating, the purple bit in the middle, how is it bringing them together? Pleasant, happy, synergy, grace, flow, support. I'm not reading all of them. Energizing, fun, grief is there as well. And then the green at the bottom. So the normal versions of calm, smooth, restorative, pain in the full body, relief. In this, just the distortion. There's grief, stuck, boring, restlessness, dissociated, losing control, and its essence: presence, breath, offering, resourcing, stable. Great. So just notice how it is to see all of that. Just see if there's anything that's surprising in that for you, anything that's you weren't expecting. And maybe there are things that are really familiar. I'm curious, I'd love to hear in the chat if anybody noticed any feelings of familiarity. Anybody, you could also put your hand up. Just to, this question, does my life feel like that? Did any of that feel familiar to you? And can you just say, the distortion of doing, yes, that's what my everyday work schedule feels like, or, the distortion of being, or in relationship, when do we have these archetypes in their different qualities actually showing up in our lives? Anything that feels familiar, just take a moment. We're heading for a break quite soon, but it'd be lovely just to harvest this as well. Please don't be shy with chat. Your wisdom is so needed to add to whatever I have to say. Yeah, thank you, Vera. Yeah, so some of these feeling familiar. Lovely. We can see each other's expression. Yeah. Lovely. So one of the things that often is a bit of an aha moment for people, you know, we're so familiar, this may or may not feel true for you, but often there's a lot of familiarity with the distortion of doing. Does that feel true? You know, we can just wave if we're agreeing. And we're really familiar in this very driven, very action-oriented culture. I wrote a lot about burnout. You know, I think you could say we have a burnout culture. The modern industrialized culture is a burnout culture. Literally, we're burning out the planet, but we're also burning out our bodies and our systems and our resources and nature. So often the being gets a kind of, that's the correction, but it's often helpful to know there's a distortion to the being, isn't it? That has its kind of shadow or its unhealthy version as well. And often, yeah, somebody's saying, Dita, thank you, you know, when we're in the doing so much, it feels like I could never get to the end of longing for being, you know, but sometimes people have been, so often people that have had long-term illnesses or been out of work, or, you know, often it's a physical problem that really prevents us from doing. But there may be other things that also is really detrimental to our well-being and our health in the end. So that was a bit of an embodied exploration of these archetypes. So I'm going to kind of move on to screen sharing again and just share the kind of head stuff my engineering brain likes. If kind of maps and models aren't your thing, just inviting you to take the words in and let them kind of, you know, come to you in whatever way feels most helpful. So really inviting you to find your own kind of way of engaging with this. And if you want to just be moving and, you know, if that's what your body needs to do, really inviting you to do that. So this map that I'm going to kind of build up in stages, for me was about putting together different things that I had never seen connected. And I think, you know, now in 2021, there's many more people that are putting all of these pieces together, you know, probably many of them with much more skill and depth in certain parts of it than I have. So I really feel clear that I'm a generalist. I'm not a neuroscience, you know, I've worked as a psychotherapist, but, you know, so I've got bits and pieces. I do feel like I'm a bit of a squirrel, you know, I gather these things and that's my kind of skill that I offer. So you may know more about any bit of this than I do, but hopefully the kind of putting together of it serves a purpose as well. And the kind of things that I wanted to put together are this question: why do we create systems of harm? So one system of harm being about systems of power and oppression, patriarchy, colonialism, countries invading each other, you know, rich people, poor people, able-bodied, disabled. Why do we create these social systems of harm where one group has more privilege, more access to resources, and one group has less, and in a way carries the pain and the suffering on behalf of the whole? That's not entirely true. So that's one bit, systems of power and oppression. Another one was to do with personal trauma. So what happens in my body, and feeling that journey that Western psychotherapy or Western psychological systems went on, from starting with a very heady way of healing, you know, as one route, and then realizing we needed feelings maybe included as well, and then realizing that that's not enough, we need the body to be included, you know, and some people have added spirit or relationship to nature to that as ways of extending what do we need to heal and be healthy. But at the center of that is something to do with, you know, this sense that there's a residue of my upbringing, a residue of overwhelming events that have happened to me, which is affecting me in the present. And then there's the whole question of what we're doing to nature, what some humans, what this modern industrialized Western global North system is doing in terms of destroying the living systems we're part of. So, you know, there are other questions, but like these different scales, inner and outer, how can I find a way of putting all of these together so that they're not either competing or we only look through one lens and we only see what that lens shows us? So this is my way of attempting to put all of these different things together. And the first bit is about individuals. So starting with that, and then we're going to look more at culture. So for me, one of the kind of aha moments, and again, I think it's much more widely connected up, is to see that these archetypes of doing and being, so in Chinese medicine, a definition of health is the balance of yin and yang. I learned from Sobonfu of the Dagara people, she talked about fire and water needing to be in balance for there to be health. If you look at developmental, infant developmental, there's autonomy and dependence as two kind of archetypal tasks of a child in order to grow up. So I felt like there were these pairs of archetypes that were being framed as a definition of health, or at least a starting point for what is health. And somewhere I made the connection, or maybe somebody made it for me, about our autonomous nervous systems, that we have a sympathetic nervous system that's about action, mobilizing, and we have a parasympathetic nervous system that's about resting, digesting, coming into more intimacy. So I got curious, engineers are always asking, what are the physical structures, the physiological structures that underpin the behavior of a system? You could say that's what engineers do, and they try to put it into maths. So I'm trying to put this into a map. So if we start with the sympathetic and parasympathetic, this is a proposition of what health might be, or a healthy ground state is where we have a balance and flow between relaxed action and relaxed stillness. Yeah, that's a kind of core definition of this work. All of the polyvagal theory, that for those of you that know more about neuroscience, suggests that's our ventral vagal system. So we've got the tendency of the sympathetic to accelerate us and the ventral parasympathetic brake. So our ground state is this constant flow between a bit more action and a bit more rest, being pulled in by the parasympathetic. And this is like a healthy ground state, and people who do a lot of nature observation are defining this as some people call it the baseline of nature. This is what a lot of animals inhabit most of the time. It's very energy efficient. So, we're just using energy for the tasks that we need to do. And when we're not doing, we just come back into rest, or we come back into rest or relationship or whatever it is. One of the important things about this is to name that there's a sympathetic, activating, mobilizing, which is not stressed. So I think it's really interesting if you Google the sympathetic, you get fight flight. We are so associated in this my culture that I grew up in, we've so associated action with stress. In mindfulness, they talk about 3 states now. They talk about soothe, drive, and threat. To me, drive already has a quality of push in it. Drive is already stressed. It may not land in you like that. So this state here, this sympathetic, relaxed action, I'm going to do something, but I'm feeling totally unstressed. Okay, so that's our ground state. And we might spend quite a lot of our lives in that. So where does most of our stress come from? Actually, as social beings, most of our stress from quite a way back in our evolution is not the lion or the predator. It's not the enemy tribe over there, or the tribe that lives next door that we have to protect our boundaries. Actually, most of the stress is our peers, is our the other members of our own tribe, and making sure that we're in a state which enables us to belong, because being excluded from the tribe is life-threatening. So most of our stress, there's some research with primates that shows 95 or 98% of stress situations, stress arousal comes from interactions within our group. So we developed at this, capacity, a stress state, which is negotiate. Lots of blood flow and awareness to the brain, to the facial muscles, to sensing and listening, taking in what's being said to us. And a lot of our stressful situations we resolve through communicating and negotiating. So all of this is healthy culture. You know, can be fun, isn't it? It can be playful. We disagree, but actually we're learning. There's, you know, we're not feeling any threat. There's a bit of stress. Okay, what about if the stress increases? So if we can't negotiate our way out of it, and that may be an escalating conflict, or it may be a sudden threat that is much more serious, somebody comes at us with a weapon, or there is a predator, or you know, a car is about to hit us, we go into flight fight. So I'm not going to talk much about this. I imagine lots of us know about these threat stress responses. This is our emergency sympathetic response. And if something is can't be resolved by running away or by fighting, another bit of this parasympathetic comes in and shuts us down, the emergency dorsal vagal part of the nerve, which takes us into freeze. So if we're in, I'm going to, you know, this is clearly simplified, but if we're in a healthy culture, when we've got all the way to flight, and freeze, there's going to be something that can happen that helps us to shake any residual stress out of our system. Okay. And that might be, just literally kind of shaking. It might be telling the story of what happened and acting it out so our body can process it all. You know, Peter Levine's work, and there's other people whose work has kind of rediscovered this probably for modern human beings, that animals tremor. So some people are doing tremoring, shaking. Somebody, Rob, asked one of the grandmothers at Standing Rock, you know, what do you do for the people that have been on the front line of the confrontations with the police or the army? And this grandmother said, we take them to the sweat lodge. So for me, the sweat lodge is a technology of what I call the return path. You know, I think the grief tending ceremonies that I learned about from Sobonfu, her people, the Dagara people, she said they have those ceremonies once a week. And it's a place where there's song and music and dance. So you're moving your body, there's harmony, there's physical touch and support, and you go to the grief shrine and you let out whatever needs to be expressed physically through sound, emotion, and so on. So for me, this return path, where there's residual stress in the bodies of individuals or groups, is an absolutely central component of healthy human culture. And in a way, this is what enables a culture to stay in health, because these things are always going to be happening, isn't it? Whether it comes from outside, natural disasters, intertribal or intra-tribal, you know, within our groups, we're not going to not have this. And in fact, when we have this and we have a return path that's functioning, all of our community can grow in resilience. So one of the things that I've really learned holding grief tending ceremonies is that grief is not a thing that's a problem or a thing to be got over so that we can get on with life. Grief is actually a medicine that we need to keep coming back together and reweaving the bonds of dependence and interdependence in our community. And I don't know if any of you have been in grief tending. I know some of you have been to that, or some of you hold them. You know, for me, that's one of the huge teachings growing up in a family where grief was really unwanted and either pathologized or repressed or expressed in very destructive ways through explosive rage. Actually, I think, you know, we're always irritating each other, however beautiful our social systems are. And there's something about the grief space where we fall down in our vulnerability into each other's arms and pull each other back to life. That is an essential kind of reweaving of our knowledge that each of our hearts is beautiful, vulnerable, tender, and we need each other. We need each other as human beings. And yeah. So this return path and its different forms, I think it's a lot of ritual, ceremony, where there are these different components. There's an invitation of holding that goes beyond the human. So we call in spirit, the earth, nature, the ancestors. We create a big holding, and together we can release and process and bring each other back from whatever has happened. And in that, we learn that we can deal with and recover from really serious situations. So our resilience as a community, as a group, goes up. Our confidence in ourselves and each other goes up. So this is not just about recovering so we can get on with the doing, which is how it's often framed. Inner transition was often framed like that in the transition movement. We do the inner so that we can do the doing. It's like all of this is just as essential a part of life. Okay, so this is my sort of map of how healthy cultures work in a very simplified forms. So here's a question: what return paths do we know of? And I would say one of the symptoms of the deep dysfunction of modern culture is that we've lost our ceremonies, our rituals, our community spaces to feel and process our pain, isn't it? We've privatized that and made it affordable only to those with money through individual therapy. Some of it might be available in the UK on the NHS. It's often very short term. But actually, there's something about doing it in a group where we're not pathologized as the one who's dysfunctional. We're not pathologized as the one with a problem. We move between expressing for myself, but also for the whole, and going back to being part of the holding structure so the next person can go down and share their grief. So there's a really essential technology that I think we've problematically lost in modern culture. Okay, what happens when the return path fails? I'm sure you kind of know post-shock recovery fails. So I would say this is where we start to have trauma in the system. I think it's helpful to say trauma is not the overwhelming event. Trauma is not the overwhelming event. Trauma is the failure of the return path. Does that make sense? Trauma is not an individual phenomenon. Trauma is a phenomenon of a cultural landscape. And I just want to really take a moment to let that land, if that feels new for you. Trauma is never an individual problem. Trauma is always a failure of a cultural landscape, because if we had a healthy landscape, and it touches me speaking about it, there would be elders, there would be healers, there would be people in our community who said that person, that group is not okay, and we're calling in a ceremony to help bring them back fully into life. If I'm traumatized, I can't necessarily do that for myself. My autonomous nervous system is running me in states that are out of my awareness, and I need people to help me track. I might know that I'm not fully okay, but actually it's a community that says, we need to do something for you. And imagine if you were a child meeting overwhelming events, and maybe it was in the situation with your parents, but somebody had said, okay, we're going to take you over here and we're going to create this healing ceremony for you to process all the shock and the grief of what just happened. How might you be different today? How would children be different today? So for me, trauma is not an event. It's an event plus a post-event failure. It's not an individual experience, it's a cultural landscape. Okay. So that's a kind of, I was looking at that as an individual nervous system kind of map. And I just want to bring these archetypes in. So for me, archetypes is about moving from our nervous systems, our autonomous nervous systems, to a cultural landscape. And this slide just mentions some of the places where I found pairs of archetypes being mentioned or spoken about as relating to health. I don't know if any of you have come across Martin Luther King's book, you know, Strength and Love, speaking about in our activism, we need to have these two archetypes. Strength and action on its own is not enough. Love on its own is not enough. We need these to come together. So there are different, you know, epistemologies, different systems of thinking that put these together. Okay, and now here's the same kind of map, but with these archetypes. So now we might say, you know, health isn't just about moving between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Health in a culture is about moving between these archetypes of action, will, strength, yang, fire, autonomy, and the archetype of rest, love, yin, water, dependence, whatever your way of framing those kind of archetypal energies is. Here's healthy culture. There will always be stress, there will always be emergencies, there will always be fight, flight, freeze, but we come back to a healthy ground state. So here's the, you know, for me, the kind of huge question: what happens when our cultural return path fails? And I'm just going to sort of propose, you know, there's a collective failure, you know, the clear situation in which this happens is colonization, when the elders, the language of the rituals, the ceremonies, the gatherings, the cosmology are deliberately destroyed by an invading people, knowing that that will destroy the health of the culture. The Romans, I was with a group, you know, speaking about how the Romans deliberately took out the spiritual center of pre-Roman Britain in Anglesey. You know, they knew that they had to destroy that in order to destroy the people, to conquer the people. And then we went and did it, you know, from the UK, my people went and did it all over the world. So this is a kind of proposal. I know that in the flow of this conference, you've been spending a lot of time here, so I'm not going to spend much time. Now what we have is residual emergency stress states in people's bodies, running what's happening, you know, it's called the autonomous nervous system because it's autonomous, it's out of awareness. So our autonomous nervous system puts us into these states without us even being aware of it. So one emergency state is flight, and the kind of behaviors we might see are avoidance, denial, manic action, constant busyness, you know, running away from the present moment. We might see fight, residual states, domination, bullying, violence, aggression, building up armies, believing that the stranger is a threat, basing our economics on competition. You know, if I don't get my share, someone else will take it. Fawning as a kind of appeasing state, placating, giving away my needs to take care of the needs of somebody else. And then there's a freeze state, dissociation, paralysis, helplessness. And this is what I see. Again, this is a proposal, you know, is it the truth? Is that these kind of states can become polarized? You know, I'm not a social scientist. It may be that they all polarize from each other, but what I see is there tends to be a kind of polarization between the people more identified with sympathetic and the people that, you know, get put in or that end up carrying for the system more of the states of helplessness, paralysis, dissociation, and we may be in different ones of these states individually at different times. So, you know, I could talk about this side of the diagram for a day, but we're just going to speak a little bit, just speak a bit about it. You know, if we ask who's running the system, who's got the energy to run the system and the confidence or the aggression or the sense of power, it's going to be these people at the top. You know, those people that are most identified with sympathetic nervous systems. especially those in fight, probably because they're wanting to take control, they're not avoiding stuff. You know, is this true? I can feel there could be 1,000 things to say that will be qualifying, or, you know, yes, but. So a bit of my curiosity is, you know, is this the shape of systems of oppression, where there's those with more power, physical power, more weaponry, more some other kind of power, can now take control, and then they can, oops, sorry, they can put their unmanageable pain. So all of this system on the right-hand side lives in a state of fear, because all of it only emerges after an overwhelming event, a life-threatening event, which we didn't recover from. So this whole side of the diagram is pervaded by fear. Everybody's got not only unmanageable pain, but also the experience of unmanageable pain where there was no healing. So we've all got an experience that when I need loving support and help and a grief ceremony, a sweat lodge, a ritual, whatever it is, it didn't happen. So the others, my community failed me, my parents failed me, life failed me, spirit failed me. So there's a profound, deep belief in the failure of the capacity of the system to hold and help us heal what feels overwhelming. And again, that may be in everybody. And now, increasingly, the system gets not only run by, but framed and described and interpreted through the lens of the people with the most capacity and the most energy. And some of what they will do, you know, we've got flight and fight, is totally avoid vulnerability. Avoid inner work. I don't want to sit on a cushion. You know, I'm doing my best to avoid all of these overwhelming painful feelings. I'm going to make a culture where it's completely normal, and actually we get lots of status by not feeling anything. Does this feel familiar? You know, I'm going to create a culture where all of our organizations don't do vulnerability, where a professional person is somebody who shows up in their capacity and their head. Yeah. And, you know, for those with the most power, anybody who shows vulnerability will be shamed or excluded or punished, you know. So there's one way of seeing the modern system. You know, I think it's really helpful to say everybody over here is carrying trauma. You know, there's no part of this system that isn't being organized by trauma. And in it, we take different roles and we push different roles onto each other. So more and more people, you know, Resmaa Menakem and others are writing about how trauma is an embodied experience. You know, white people are putting their trauma into black bodies. Wealthy people are putting their trauma into the bodies of poor people. You know, homeless people, refugees, the other. Men are doing it to women. Parents are doing it to children. And so, you know, he talks about dirty pain. So over here, because we can't manage our pain, it just gets recycled in the system. We can't manage it, we can't heal it, we can't express it. Okay. So I'm not going to, I've spoken about all of that. Let's just put this in. What are the return paths we need from the right-hand side? So for me, this is the question of our time. You know, how do we take this system, you know, that I'm a part of, that, you know, anybody in contact with modern world has somewhere inside them. How do we do that and heal it? And there's the kind of technological side, but actually for me, the inner work is essential. If we're not finding the practices that enable us to process our pain, to start digging up, you know, when we do grief tending, sometimes I say it's like an archaeological excavation, because there's not only the what happened to me this week, in the last month, in the last 6 months. When I dig down, there's all of the things that happened to me as a child, the things that came down through my ancestral lineages. There's the huge landscape of being part of a culture of racism, of class oppression, of gender oppression. All of that is in my body. And as I excavate, I find the grief of, and that happened, and there was no place to express it. Isn't it? We get this layer that we meet again and again. And I tried to speak to somebody, I tried to bring it, and it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe, and I had to put it away again. And I think most of us have a part of us that is waiting and waiting and waiting. I can feel my grief as I speak it, for there to be a place where we can restore our connections by expressing our pain together. Because our nervous systems and our bodies are wired to do that. Isn't it? Our bodies, isn't it? We see it in the grief tending time and again. Our bodies are wired to do this and to come back into relationship through shaking, grief, holding, beauty, song, dance, music, fire, earth, falling down, picking each other up, saying welcome, saying thank you, seeing grief as service, as medicine. So here are some of the, some of the suggestions, and I think it's, it's such a question for our movements and our groups, is how do we do this together, and how do we deal not only with the personal, but with the collective? How are we going to heal, centuries of colonialism and patriarchy? How are we going to do that? And many people are doing it already, isn't it? Blessings on this time. So grateful to be living in a time where, there's increasing respect for indigenous traditions, the old ways, and how do we learn from those without appropriating them? What a question that is, and Western neuroscience, kind of modern understandings of trauma, I feel like is catching up with things that, people have known for millennia. Okay. So I'm just going to put a few little drops in of, what can we do today? I know that's a bit of the focus. So one thing is bringing awareness to this system, bringing awareness. If we're being run by fight, flight ourselves, if I'm in a constant state of busyness, if I'm in groups that endlessly have time pressure, deadlines, actually, we're just going to head over to that right-hand side. So there are these sort of macro, big scale return paths, but actually this sense, that first map, we get busy, there is stress, there are pressures, we need to put in micro return paths. And the first bit of that is awareness. So being able to detect and discern, what state am I in? In my group, in this group of people working together, what state are we in? What does it feel like when we're in health? What's the difference between joyful, unstressed action and stressed action? How can we keep bringing ourselves back to that ventral vagal, easy flow between rest and action? So stop and learn. What are the return paths that work for us? Is it shakeout? Is it cake? Is it, a round of appreciations? So number 2, how do we design culture with healthy systems in mind? These words at the top are my sort of short list. So resourced, if I'm resourced, valued, connected, empowered, and that word on line 2, safe, those are my 5 words. If I'm feeling those things, I'm probably on the left-hand side of the diagram. Does that make sense? Resourced, valued, connected, empowered, and safe together. If we're feeling all of those things together, if our organization and movement is feeling those things together, we're much more likely to be able to learn from the people who are different to us, explore places inside myself where I've got that system running me, experiment with new ways of working that might take us towards more health. So some of these practices, you know, that are very embodied in a lot of old ways: appreciation, celebration, gratitude, curiosity, you know, the exploration of power. How is that being held and used? And I think this is crucial. You know, I mean, I'm a grief tending person, so obviously I'm putting it in, but that's why I do grief tending. You know, if we don't tend our grief, what happens? It ends up as conflict from fight, burnout from flight, right? Conflict and burnout, what I saw in most groups, if they didn't create and build some of these healthy cultural design practices in at the beginning. And I think, you know, you can apply that at any level of scale. Me, myself, organizations, groups, movements, our modern Western global North culture burning out the planet. And this, for me, you know, like I said, is one of the huge questions. How do we do this? I don't have the answer, but, you know, people are creating truth and reconciliation processes. There are people starting to bring rituals, you know, artworks, community art, spaces, ceremonies, process work, the work that reconnects, movements, you know, I mean, and all of these movements for bringing awareness are all part of this, aren't they? Even understanding the landscape is the first part. Awareness first, and then actions to heal. Okay, I've probably spoken too much, but I hope that's a bit of a taste in this short session. So what else do you know? What would you add? You know, what's your piece? What are you holding? Because I imagine everyone on this call, everyone as part of this conference, you're doing your bit. You know, how do we do this? So let's just stay with the and question. So let's take a breath together. So lots of ideas. Just let's give it some time. We're just going to do a little bit of coming back to our bodies. So inviting you to connect again with some of those things we connected with at the beginning, or whatever works for you. Feeling the earth, feeling breath. If you need to shake and move, please listen to your body. Let's just take a few minutes to stretch. If there's grief, can you let that come through? Can you say welcome? If there's outrage, if there's something else, if there's numbness, giving it some tenderness, welcome, soothing touch. And it may be that you want to make some sound. So we might be inviting the parasympathetic, digesting. And there may be images, sensations coming, just noticing them, welcoming. You may want to be writing things in a journal or drawing, whatever helps you to stay present with your experience as much as possible. Some people suggest connecting the right and left parts of your body, so maybe stroking the other arm, cheeks, helping our right and left brain to integrate. If there are things there that feel new, is this true? Does it work for you? Checking your own experience. Okay, and we're going to go into small groups. So really tracking what you need, you know, acknowledging that when we speak about these things, it touches our own experience. It may be touching things for you where there's pain or there's numbness or there's something else, different feelings or not. So we're just going to go into threes this time, and we're going to just have a couple of minutes each to just process that a little bit, share whatever you need to share. Let's do 2.5 minutes, if that's okay, Dita. So 7.5 minutes. Please, in your groups of 3, make sure that everybody gets a time to share. So you might just want to take it in turns. And let's not, you know, interpret for each other or try to fix each other. Let's just give each other a bit of space to express, what am I with right now? How is this landing in me? You know, as well as whatever feels supportive and kind in our group. So Dita's going to do some magic. Thank you. And if anybody's not okay and just needs to stay and have a bit of something with us, you're also welcome to stay in the main group if that's not what you need right now. And please track what your body needs. If you need to walk around, you know, just do what you need. But this is an offer as a way of digesting, just coming present. So welcome back, welcome back. And yeah, one of the things that I really learned from Sobonfu was the power of welcoming as a social technology, you know, is how I took it, that we need to be welcomed as we are day after day. I love this idea that each time we meet, we're meeting a slightly new person. So welcoming you as you are now, slightly changed to how you were when you went into that breakout room. You know, and within that welcoming all that is with you, isn't it? Whatever you're feeling and thinking, whatever your thoughts and reflections are part of our shared wisdom. You know, in these workshops, we don't have a lot of time. I'm sure that in the Reworlding, there's spaces where you get to talk to each other much more. And I know there'll be a huge amount of wisdom in this big group. So it'd be lovely to just harvest a little bit of that. We're going to invite you just to put anything in the chat. So we're going to use chat as a way of kind of recording. I'm always really nosy, and you know, for me this work is evolving all the time. Each time I speak it, it comes out differently, and I'm learning from all the people that receive it and reflect back to me. So I'm really interested what resonates, what didn't land well, what you know more about, you know, especially those questions at the end, you know, what are the forms? How are we creating health? What does it feel like? How do we know when we taste it? You know, examples, because that's such a crucial wisdom. So please do add anything that you want in the chat about a reflection. I'm going to store that after in my own private little space, if that's okay. So yeah, please share what landed, if there's anything you want to express to the group, and a little headline example of something that you've experienced. I'm going to stop talking. Let's have a few minutes chat harvest. So this question, isn't it, how do we create these return paths in ways that are accessible? Does that feel like a live question? Certainly it is for me. Wonderful. Is there anybody that just needs to speak something? You know, maybe you can put your hand up. Trusting Dita and Teresa.
Renchi, I can see your hand up.
All I'm doing is speaking to because I have a great trouble with chat, and I feel concept out sort of thing. Yes, I've totally enjoyed this session at another level, but not through charts or anything too verbal. That's kind of does my head in, but I absolutely love what's underneath the words. Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So good to remember, isn't it? We all take it in different ways, and you know, trusting that it works us in whatever way our body needs the wisdom of the body. Yeah.
Thank you, Sophie. Wow, that was just beautiful, awesome, so clearly presented. I loved all your slides. I loved you building stuff up. I love you talking about Sibomfu. I just want to remember Maeve Gavin, who used to run grief rituals here, is no longer on the planet with us. I've enjoyed myself so much this morning. I feel so resourced. And the very last bit you said about welcoming, I just felt moved to tell you all that my daughter slept in the same bed as me till she was 6 or 7. I was a single parent, and most mornings she would crawl down the bottom of the bed and sort of curl up around my knees or ankles, and I'd go, oof, 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 and then pull her up from the bedclothes and say, welcome to the world. And she's a very emotionally intelligent young woman, maybe because she was welcomed. And I feel so welcomed here in this company. Gratitude.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, thank you for mentioning Maeve, who was one of the, weaver of many of these things that really taught me. So, yeah, thank you.
Justin, I see your hand up.
Same as Jane. Really wonderful session. Thank you so much. And it's a question, I guess, is the trauma the not welcoming of experience, the not welcoming, but not just individually, but collectively, not collectively welcoming whatever it is that's happened as being what's happened, like in this conference gathering we're doing, where there isn't enough space, really, for, in a way, for each of us to really meet each other in a way that we would like, but welcoming that, knowing that that's part of what we're needing to digest, because so stuff doesn't become toxic, it becomes good fertilizer. Is that, yeah, that's a question.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if I'm going to catch exactly the bit you're pointing to, Justin. I think this thing of welcome sometimes in grief tending and other spaces, I think there's a part of us, there's a movement where we're being pulled into life, isn't it? There's beauty, there's warmth, there's joy, there's song, there's, tasty food, there's community, there's growth, development, expression, creativity. And then there's, it's painful, it's cold, I'm not welcome. It's too much, it's too hard. And I feel like, part of us is always orienting like this. And there's so much in modern culture that takes us this way, my Western modern culture that takes us out. It's painful and there's no place. So for me, there's, sometimes it's like an edge of living and dying. Sometimes I say there's 1,000 ways of dying while you're still breathing. Isn't it? We can be numb, we can be super busy, we can be harmful, we can self-harmful, we can just be, acting like a robot. There's 1,000 ways of walking the planet and really not being fully present in life because we're not being welcomed. Yes, thank you. And it's one of the most beautiful things. Often, people come back from a grief shrine and you say thank you and welcome, and they go straight back because actually that touches the place in them, like exactly like you're saying, that longed for that. I longed for it, and it wasn't there again and again and again. And that grief just makes me fall down. So yeah, how do we do that? And there's that edge, isn't there, of authenticity, and it feels really clunky. And are we borrowing? And how do we do that respectfully? And the longing in me, how can I do that? Find a way for the truth of that. I am really grateful that you're here, disagreeing with me, looking different, with a completely different perspective, and part of that again is I need to feel resourced and grounded and safe and all of that so that I can meet others from that place. Thank you. Yeah.
Pat, and maybe you're last.
Yes, yeah, just quickly. Sophie, do you have this written somewhere? Is there a book? Is there a paper? Because I have this sense of franticness. I've been doing a lot of this work in pieces, but this is the first time I ever find it all put together. And it was like a frantic wanting to hold on to it and wanting to remember and catch up and look at everything and multitask. So is there a book, a paper?
It's a very, very, very slowly emerging book that takes many years. But my way, I'm so not a book writer, but is to try to record these. I'm really happy to share the presentations. I've got a very, very grotty piecemeal website that I never share with anybody. The grief tending work has its website, so the grieftending.org. You know, if anybody wants to read more about the lineages that I've learned from honoring my teachers, if anybody wants to help me write a book, I'd so appreciate that.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'm really happy to share the resources that I have, but the recordings of this can be a start at least. So yeah, grateful, Dita, for you making sure it's recording. The other thing that is happening, again, you know, thanks to some wonderful other people, is at the moment I'm kind of prototyping a longer course on healthy human culture. And if you're interested in that, you can sign up, you know, so if you put something in the chat, but we can maybe send the link. There's a little form just gathering, I'm interested in this. So it might be a, you know, 1 day, 2 day workshop, or a kind of 6-week program. So if you're interested in that, then make sure that I get to hear about it so I can let you know when those things emerge. Yeah, thank you. I just want to say a last couple of words, if that's all right. You know, thank you for those questions, and I would love to spend a week talking to you all about it. And the conference carries on, isn't it? The Reworlding carries on, so blessings to that. Yeah, just the edge. I just want to acknowledge, you know, so there can be a feeling of, I'm going to go out and make a grief tending space. I'm going to go out and do this. I'm going to make an acknowledging that these structures of resistance are formed in the place of trauma, and trauma is about life and death, right? So I just want to acknowledge the seriousness and the care that we need to make in a toxic culture where there are huge defenses against healing. Better to sit in the pain we know than risk going to that moment where we were traumatized and there was no help and we couldn't bear it and we cut ourselves apart and we went on in survival mode. That's no longer just an individual landscape, it's a collective landscape. So I want to acknowledge the part in me, in our system, that would rather destroy life than come back to it, and really say to you, if you want to set these spaces up, please be safe. Find your community. Don't do it on your own. Know the people that you're working with, you know, and don't stop yourself, but find ways of walking into this landscape of trauma with resource and safety and community and connections and backup. Does that make sense? I don't want to put anybody off, but somebody, one of my supervisors once said, this is a dangerous territory. You know, it's not a landscape that's filled with daisies and fluffy animals. You know, it's so please do it. Please experiment, but please do it with others. And, you know, let's keep, you know, this question, how do we get grief tending into the mainstream? At the moment, I feel like there needs to be a boundary around it. You know, for me, workshop culture is a place of radical and deep experimentation, where the ones that are ready come. I'm not going to do grief tending in the market square yet. I'll do other things in the market square, but I'm not going to do grief tending there yet. I don't think it's safe. You know, I think there's a whole journey that needs to happen. And in some places, often where people are dying already, you know, where people are killing each other, then there can be more space to take a risk. Does that make sense? Sometimes those are the places that are absolutely not ready to go there because the trauma is too fresh. But sometimes there's a possibility of trying out restorative circles or a shared grief practice, because actually, our failure to deal with what is killing people. So I just want to name that and not put anybody off, but acknowledge, you know, this is serious as well and real.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for sharing and for sharing from such a deep place of embodying what you're bringing here and experience. I'm afraid we're out of time and we're really trying to honor our time commitments here. So we're going to have to close this session here. Please feel free to join us on Slack and continue the conversation there. So much gratitude for everybody that was in this session with us, journeying together And yeah, hoping to see you in following sessions. Much love.
And maybe
Thank
if people
you.
want to unmute, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you to the holders and hosts for supporting. Blessings, and the organisers, and to all of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you.
Sophie.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so much.
fantastic.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you.
Be well, everyone. Thank you.